Once again, the Toad Cam Friday mind emission. Hemispheric integration. This idea of hemispheric integration had become very much part of the earlier Grinderian area of NLP. And the idea that hemispheric integration and cultures and cultural processes seem to come together. There seemed to be some requirement in the human nature, in the human being, a requirement or a need for external sources, external references that allowed us to move more toward a state of hemispheric integration, which was posited as a very desirable condition. And sort of a counterposit was that much modern life, many of the institutions and the requirements, the burdens placed on us in this later 20th century, early 21st century life tended to be separative, tended to bring us into a state of hemispheric disintegration. I think there are some very good technical explanations for what's going on, as well as cultural, we might say anthropological explanations. And the rise of other surrogate forms or substitute forms of traditional ritual means of integrating the hemispheres, which have given us some of these kind of strange and somewhat pathologized aspects of late stage culture, seem to be the human yearning for the integrated condition, which is denied or in some cases even kind of deliberately engendered as a means of producing an addictive consumer class, you might say. So perhaps the addictive personality is somehow very closely related to the disintegrated or the separation of even the hemispheres of the mind. Now I know that there have been people in the NLP community, and there have been plenty of people in general, in neuroscience you will find this, that are absolutely dismissive of the idea of separate consciousnesses or subconsciousnesses inhabiting different parts of the brain. I did come across a fascinating psychiatrist. He's a legitimate psychiatrist, affiliated with McLean Hospital in Boston, which is the Harvard's hospital. So he's been, I think, associated with the Harvard Medical School and the McLean Hospital, a guy named Fredric Schiffer. And Fredric Schiffer wrote a book on dual brain psychiatry, and he has developed very simple and effective techniques for treating the mind as a dual brain phenomenon. So the right and left brains are accessed using a very simple goggle technique in Schiffer's work, which allows him to directly speak to the right or the left hemisphere. And Schiffer's thinking is that a great deal of the problem of therapy is being able to get sort of clean access to one hemisphere or the other and help the mind, the collective integrative mind, work through issues, problems, discomforts, one hemisphere at a time, and then allow those hemispheres to integrate. I will put on the text generator Fredric Schiffer's name. He's written one book, and it's quite good. It's very interesting. There was not a lot of literature following on Schiffer. Once he wrote that, I think that was in 1998. And then there was a long silent period. There's kind of, I guess, a few people were really into it, and a lot of people just couldn't deal with it. It was just too alien to their model. And I'm not sure whose limitation is being most underlined by that kind of refusal to take the subject up. Until lately, another, I wouldn't say neuroscientist, neuroanatomist, Dr. Jill Taylor, wrote her book more recently, My Stroke of Insight, which once again began to draw a focused beam of light onto this issue of dual hemisphericity. I will say, kind of in concluding, because these tubes are limited in time, when you look at intact traditional cultural practices, one comes to mind especially is the Sufi choir. You might say a kind of an integrative, prayerful singing called Zikr. And Zikr is seen in many forms. It can take on almost a warlike form. You will see Zikr coming out of Chechnya in southern Russia, where Zikr seems to take on a very almost an aggressive, warlike kind of war chant quality. And you will see the very sublime practices of Zikr and the Sufi chants, say, in other parts of the Middle East, like Turkey, and even in places like upstate New York, there are Sufi retreats where they practice Zikr. And Zikr is very interesting because it's a sung prayer with a choir and I guess you would call him an imam, a leader. And the Sufi practice is very physical. It's very embodied. There's a great deal of swaying, spinning, activities that I have seen in hypnosis practice and therapeutic trance practices, when there seems to be a great deal of connection with the body and a swaying and spinning, which may bring up some of these vestibular issues. I'm very sure it brings up very strong vestibular reference that indicate an integration going on, a profound integration. I'm not talking about sort of, some kind of lightweight, rinky-dink kind of thing, but really, at the soul level of integrating. And if we look at the Sufi practices, the Zikr practice, definitely, if you observe them, there is a lot of vestibular stuff going on. So many things are coming together here. Hemispheric integration and the visual field work with the visual system of Dr. Fredric Schiffer, the auditory vestibular. That's a very interesting mapping of auditory to vestibular mapping that seems to be happening in the Sufi practice, etc. So I don't want to carry on forever here. We've got a limited amount of time, but I think this is one of the central issues, and how we get there and how we magnify and use these various integrative practices and modalities, I think is one of the very key things that we should be attending to and doing. One of our sort of reasons for being in NLP, if NLP can really get a handle on that.